for joining us on the call. I'll commence the start of the event. Good afternoon, and a real welcome to the launch event for the Community Confidence Action Research launch of the final report. I'm Tom Halpin. I'm a board member of the Scottish Police Authority. I did have a background in policing in the past, so I really understand the significance of maintaining trust and confidence in policing in communities, and on that basis, I'm really grateful and comforted by the level of interest from elected members in today's call as well. It's really important with that connection with the community and their elected members. I also had the privilege of chairing the project steering group through the research. As an authority, we prioritise monitoring trust and confidence in policing, recognising that trust and confidence sit at the heart of policing legitimacy. We monitor high-level trust and confidence through routine polling activity and drawing other surveys and data. However, none of that is a substitute for understanding the day-to-day lived and community experience, which we only get through engagement with local people on the ground who know their communities best. I also want to recognise the collaborative effort and ongoing commitment of everyone who's been involved in this piece of participative research over the last 3 years. I want to acknowledge the research team themselves, the local policing teams, and the local authorities and their officers, along with the community groups and their own representatives. Critically, those local people who have taken part in the community conversations and surveys to inform our work need recognition. We do appreciate that doing things with communities requires considerable motivation and participation. And this research was largely conducted at a time when communities were recovering from the effects of the pandemic. And it was also at a time when there's a cost of living crisis hitting hard. And yet we've seen excellent levels of participation and interest across the totality of the research. So it shows its relevance to those people on the ground. So at this launch today, we're going to firstly hear from the project team, who will recap the main findings and the approach taken, before we then hear about the local policing delivery in each of the 4 areas that were subject of the research project. Assistant Chief Constable Tim Mayers, who has been very significant in this, will conclude the inputs to our event by summarising Police Scotland's approach to the development of local community policing. And that is an absolute priority for the Scottish Police Authority, as well as the Police Scotland. Just before we start the inputs, just some brief housekeeping points. If for some reason I drop off the call, Martin Smith will take over until I can rejoin. Can I ask you to keep your microphones on mute unless you're speaking, and use the raise hands facility to indicate if you wish to come in. And for those who are watching in live stream, there's a chat facility. I'd ask you please to use that to raise any questions or comments, and one of the team will do their best to respond to you. So with that, can I now hand over to Martin and Jennifer, who have been leading on the delivery of the project. Martin Smith and Jennifer Galbraith, over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom. So it's great to see so many familiar faces on this call, first of all. It's been a long project, and it's lovely for you to be here today. I'm going to take us through the background to this project and the way we conducted it, and then I'll hand over to Martin, who will then kind of outline what we've learned. So, with me, Martin, I'm happy if you move on the slides, if that is easier. So, in brief, the Authority and Police Scotland started this in 2021 It was conducted by the SPA Strategy and Performance Team and Police Scotland's Partnerships, Prevention and Community Wellbeing Division, and that's now part of Policing Together. Of this, I should say Colin Heggie on the call, who was part of that division, and alongside myself and Martin formed the project team, and there were various others at stages of the work. So we were interested in looking at confidence in communities that experience deprivation in some form, and this could be in various forms. As research has shown, this could be a factor impacting confidence in policing. So the project itself had 4 main aims, and I'll just kind of talk through them briefly. So the first was to enhance the policing system's understanding of what drives public confidence in policing on a day-to-day community level. The next was to kind of improve relationships between the police and the public at a local level. And this was through kind of improving understanding and awareness of modern policing demands and challenges. The third aim was to develop insights into what communities consider to be confidence building, kind of small scale sustainable interventions. So we're not looking to drastically change the system that police and partners can put into effect. And the last one was to develop a model for engagement and positive action that Police Scotland could adapt and adopt as appropriate to improve confidence in local policing across Scotland. I should add as well, this work was exploratory and it's the first project of its kind for the authority to be involved in, so that was very exciting from an SPA kind of point of view. The map that you see here covers all the localities that we did the work in, and as you can see, it's quite a spread. So we had Letham in Perth, we had Levenmouth in Fife, Irvine Fullarton in North Ayrshire, and Wick in Highland. And we were really keen to get that capturing of experiences from different geographies, as that could impact confidence in policing. Tom, I see you've got your hand up. Sorry. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
Unintentional, my apologies.
No worries. So we developed a 7-step engagement model. So I'll kind of briefly go through this, but you'll all be familiar with it, having been involved. So the first was to kind of approach local authority chief executives, raise awareness amongst locally elected members, and also meet with community groups, which was essential to this work. And it seems like quite a while ago in some of the areas, considering how long this has been on for. We also did visits to the areas and environmental visual audit. So that was just having a look around because there's only so much that Google can do. Our next step was then in collaboration with each community to develop a survey and see where people were at in terms of their confidence in policing and get some figures around how they felt and their thoughts on their local area. And then this led into a conversation with each community where we all kind of met up, had discussions on the survey findings and on people's thoughts around how confidence in policing could be improved in their area. We then took this away and local policing came up with ideas of what they could kind of feasibly deliver that was sustainable across the project. Like I said, small scale interventions that they thought could make a change. And we ran these by the communities to see if this did fit the bill and if they were happy with them, and got feedback. So the 5th step was then implementing these ideas, and the slide has some examples of what was undertaken, but I won't go into that because I know the local policing teams will come in later on this to kind of outline it. And that led to the 6th step, which was the evaluation, and that was essentially, have people notice these? What did they think about them? And how do they feel about the police now? Which then fed into a final event where we reflected on the project overall and the kind of community's perspectives and the project team's perspective on the work and local policing teams' perspectives and how it was conducted. And I should say we've got reports for various stages of this work and they're published on the SPA website as well. And we wanted to publish as we go, so bring everyone along with us and see what we see in terms of the findings and the information we were gathering. So I'll hand over to my colleague Martin, who will outline some of the key findings, which I think you'll all be interested in.
Thanks, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everybody, as well. So in terms of the first sort of set of insights here, we have these sort of main themes. They're all in the final report in more detail, but these are the themes as they relate to people's views on the sense of place, the sense of community, and some of the issues which they feel are underpinning what is reported to be a sort of lower level of confidence in the police. Positively, there was across all four areas of a very strong sense of community spirit, of people helping one another and trying to make improvements within their communities. However, one thing which did come up in some of the communities was a sense of a growth in disrespectful attitudes among some sections of the community, often along intergenerational lines. There was also a perception that their areas, particularly post-pandemic, had a growing sort of sense of retreat and abandonment from public services in those areas. And that was manifesting in a deterioration of the physical urban fabric, shops closing down and services retreating or not reopening post-COVID. We also had mixed views on the term deprivation. Some people were very comfortable that deprivation was the right term to describe the conditions in the community, particularly in relation to things like unemployment and crime levels. Others felt that the term can be stigmatizing and did not apply to them as individuals or to some of their client groups, and felt that that might affect participation in the project in a negative way as well. And then in terms of some of the issues which came up across all four areas, one was around the visibility of drug dealing and drug consumption, and that would extend from more serious drugs down to vaping and consumption of alcohol, being very visible in communities and seemingly not being addressed and tackled. Related to that, endemic, repetitive antisocial behaviour, recurring on a frequent basis, the same kinds of issues, repeated reporting of those issues, but not seeing long-term solutions to many of those antisocial behaviour issues. And the third element concerned road safety, but that also includes off-road sort of motorcycle, quad bike use, particularly by young people. So quite cross-cutting issues were being raised, mostly around antisocial behaviour or relatively low-level criminality. In terms of insights about policing, I've got two slides here before we finish up. So through the surveys and some of the conversations, people were reporting lower levels of confidence in the local police, but nevertheless very high levels of trust and faith that the police were trying to do a good job. A similar positive view came across in relation to the use of campus cops, where they are being used in communities, very well regarded, and also where there were dedicated community policing officers that were recognisable to the community. That was also very much valued. And in the survey work that we did with children and young people through schools in some of the areas, the reported levels of trust and confidence in the police there were extremely great and very high, relative to what we were hearing through the conversations with mainly older people. In terms of other aspects of views on the police, generally there was a sense that the provision of policing, the supply of policing, if you like, to these areas is not sufficient to meet the local demand. So it wasn't necessarily about the quality of policing, but more around the quantity of policing. And that links into a perception that the police are not sufficiently visible and accessible to those communities, and not connected enough into community life. And then the sort of third main theme is that there was a confusion regarding how antisocial behaviour is being tackled, and that extends right back to how it's reported, who you report it to, who takes action, and who feeds back to communities. And if I just show the second slide, some further insights. The reference was often made to inconsistent police attendance at local community events. This is where police would come along with the intention of being present for an event, but then pulled away for operational reasons, and that creates a sense of inconsistency or a sense of non-permanence of police in attending community events. Many people also mentioned unfamiliarity with who their local policing team officers are. In terms of some of the presentations that were given at the conversations that we held, particularly the presentations by the police, where they would present about the local area and some crime and incident statistics, that was quite illuminating for people. And there was a recognition from that there isn't, from their point of view, clear access to local information about policing and local police priorities and statistical information. And that was something which would be very much valued. The presentation was also given around what modern policing looks like and everyday life of police officers and the things that they deal with, particularly on the safeguarding and vulnerability agenda. So that raised awareness, and there had been limited awareness of just how much time is spent doing non-sort of traditional community policing work. Another thing that was discussed was social media usage, a sense that there is good social media coverage from most places, but it doesn't feel very hyper-local. And particularly when that came to the sort of large geographical area of Highland and Islands Division, the sort of lack of granularity of the social media meant that a lot of the posts on there did not feel very relevant to people, for example, living in Wick, when those channels would also cover lots of local information about Inverness or Fort William, for example. And generally, we had a sense that there isn't a great understanding around the policing system in Scotland and how that operates, how it's governed, and how it's inspected, and how things changed back in 2012-13 with the enactment of the new legislation. So I'll come to a close there. Jennifer and I are more than happy to answer any questions if anybody has any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Martin. I mean, what I've taken is a high level points in there. Whatever the stats around anti-social behaviour actually show the reducing problem, but we know in the recent work that the public perception and feeling about it is it's not, and you've confirmed this with the feeling it's actually endemic antisocial behaviour. And against that backdrop, we talked of cost of living crisis, etc. You know, described as deteriorating community fabric, which is obviously a challenge for everyone. And although trust is still high, confidence is actually low within that. And then there's the inconsistency of knowing who the local police officers are. So with that sort of high level, is there any questions for the team members from the call at the moment? I'll ask you to raise your hand if you have. Lorraine Gillis, your hand was up first, so we'll go straight to you, Lorraine.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I was speaking to Martin yesterday a little bit about the antisocial behaviour stuff. So some people might know that the Independent Working Group published a report on Tuesday with a whole bunch of recommendations around what we need to do around antisocial behaviour. But I'd be keen to unpick some more of what people were saying about antisocial behaviour. So the only comment that we've had today is something around the definition. So we know that there are issues with the definition. One of the recommendations that the working group has made is that we review the legislation and we do a kind of deep dive into data, because we don't actually know what antisocial behaviour is being committed. So it was really just to kind of connect to that, to say I think it'd be useful to have a little bit more of a chat about it and maybe understand a little bit more about what people were saying about antisocial behaviour, and just to I'll put the report in the chat actually, so people can see that it's there.
That'd be great, Lorraine. Any immediate response to Lorraine?
Yeah, just I suppose more than happy to have that discussion.
Yeah, okay, we'll take that off the table. Can I come to Tim Mears just now?
Yeah, sorry, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just I suppose to link into Lorraine's points about the report, my colleague, Assistant Chief Constable Mark Sutherland, is leading on our response to that report. So clearly we're working very closely together, and Mark will be meeting with the Minister to discuss that, the policing aspect of that. But clearly it's not, as with everything in this presentation today, it's not just about policing, but we absolutely need to be on our game around this.
Thanks, Tim. Amanda Colcard.
Thanks, Chair, and probably cheeky to come in with a question given I'm part of the team, but I guess first on Lorraine's point, there's a watch this space. Antisocial behaviour is something that we've been focused on as a team for a while and something we want to continue to look at, so it would be good to have that conversation. But my question for Jen and Martin was more around the model. So Jen, you said in your introduction that this is the first time the authority's done a piece of work like this, and I think it's really exciting that we're in that space now. But reflecting on your experience over the delivery of the project, or are there any key points in learning in terms of how we might go about doing something similar in future that you'd want to share with the group?
Can I make a suggestion? Okay, so we chose 4 areas. Well, I've got 2 suggestions for what we might have done differently. So we had 4 areas, and when we were planning the work, we initially hoped to complete one area before the second area started and the third area started, and so on. A much more staggered approach. In practice, what happened was a lot of bleed from locality 1 work into locality 2, and I think, had we had a bit more of a cushion there and a bit more review of locality 1, we could have then adapted our engagement model more accordingly as to what we'd learnt and what worked and what didn't work so well for the subsequent localities. But that would have required the luxury of potentially more time and so on at that right point. The other thing I would have liked to have done would have been to have augmented the research sort of approach that we use around surveys and community conversations, some of which were quite lengthy and in-depth, with more sort of on the spot, sort of embed ourselves as a research team in the locality and just catch people at times that were most suitable to them for what might be just a 2 or 3 minute chat or a conversation about policing in the local area. As opposed to asking people to come to the events that we'd organised. So that's my reflection, Amanda. Thank you.
Okay, going in the order of the hands, I have a contributor, Susan, but I have no other name there. So Susan, please join us.
Sorry, I should have my surname on there. It's me, Susan McVie. Sorry about that. I've obviously signed into it with the wrong name. Anyway, thank you very much, Martin and Jennifer, for your really neat summary of what was actually quite a complex report, and I know there were a lot of findings, so to distill it down to those few is very, very useful. I should declare before asking my questions that I was a member of the advisory group for this particular project, and so I have some vested interest in it. I have 2 questions, which I don't think will come as a surprise to those who were involved in the group, but they're useful to air in a more public forum. The first one is around partnership. One of the things I think that came out through the project as it evolved was that many of the things that impact on confidence in the police are not factors that the police have direct control over. And there was a lot of discussion around the fact that many of these, quite complex problems within communities require a strong partnership approach, and that the confidence in the police can only come if there's also confidence in the ability of other local authority or other partners to tackle some of these issues. So I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what conclusions you've drawn about how police partnership could help to not only resolve some of these issues, but also have a direct effect on improving confidence in policing itself. And the second question is about the kind of generalizability of the findings. When the original, kind of prior to this piece of work developing, I think myself and some colleagues had done some analysis of the Scottish Crime and Justice Survey around confidence in policing, and we looked at differences between different types of areas. And actually what it showed was that although confidence in policing was lower amongst more deprived areas in Scotland, actually that had remained relatively stable. So the relative decline in public confidence was actually a bigger decline amongst more affluent areas, people living in areas that had previously had a very high level of confidence, which had actually come down quite a lot. And I know that the research focused on 4 areas that were at the more deprived end of the scale. But do you think that the conclusions you've drawn from this project will have generalisability to all communities, regardless of levels of deprivation? Thank you.
I'm happy to come in with some answers, and Martin, if you want to, I'll just jump in. So I suppose in terms of the partnerships, yes, they're absolutely key, and many issues came up that were obviously not solely in the remit of policing. And I think communication is a huge part of that. One of the things with our community conversations is actually just communicating to people what the police are actually responsible for and what their remit is, and having that transparency and that kind of education piece. And that was one of the initiatives that was run by our project partner in this, in terms of a kind of information presentation, which outlined the role of policing now as well. So I think partnerships are absolutely key, you're right, but there's that communication and that kind of like filtering down of what these partnerships do, what they entail, and what the remit of each partner actually is in terms of, I suppose, an education piece. In terms of generalisability, I mean, the way the study was conducted, we can't do generalisability in terms of the traditional kind of p-value statistical significance kind of route. However, it is clear that the findings from across all the 4 areas are very similar. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it was the same across Scotland. However, the only way to find that out is to go and go out and ask more questions. So I couldn't say for certain it's generalisable across Scotland, but I would say I have strong suspicions that it is.
I'm conscious of managing their timetable here. Martin, maybe if you've got another point that you could put it in the chat. Could I come to Bailey Michael Williams? Michael, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think my question is one of the things I've historically found about the police is that they do tend to move on relatively frequently after 2 or 3 years or so. So every time you try to, as a community or as a councillor, you start to develop a work stream with them, the officer then moves on and suddenly everything comes to a grinding halt. And I'm just wondering if that was something that was actually picked up within the survey.
Martin or Jennifer?
Yeah, so I suppose turnover in terms of officers was something that came up in terms of the consistency and who you're engaging with at a local level. So that is something that definitely came up in our conversations. I imagine that will be discussed a little bit more later on. But yes, it came up as a kind of issue in terms of kind of maintaining the relationships that obviously are built by each individual officer, only to then move on. So yes, Councillor, it did come up. Martin, have you got anything you'd like to add on that?
I'm conscious, Michael, that I mean, we all really recognise that's a challenge in terms of local policing and management, and we're fortunate that we've got the police still to input into this, so I'm sure that's a conversation we'll develop further in terms as we go through the event. But maybe ACC mayors can think about how we could start to make inroads in that and his input later on. Now, in terms of, but we've got Susan McVeigh as part of the sort of steering group, etc. Is there questions in terms of the project from other members of the steering group that they would want to raise? I'm quite content with that. Okay, so even in the limited time for questions here, and use the chat, and that we can come back in terms of if there's anything we need to look at deeper. But you start to see themes emerging that are really important at the local level, and that trust and confidence and maintaining that. The almost ambiguity about when you get into those subjects that really are important in local communities around antisocial behaviour, and what does it mean in one area compared to another area, and the impact that is this person, and respecting that, and making sure that how we tackle that and work beyond the police in terms of that engagement is so important as well. So let's go and explore the reflections from the 4 local areas that are involved in this. That's going to be delivered by reps from the local policing teams, with 10 to 15 minutes each. So this is who they delivered the project and the test of change on the ground. We'll start in Letham and Perth. So I see we've got a slide now from Inspector Stephen Gray from Tayside Division. Stephen, can I hand over to you at this point?
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair. I'll just start off with asking you to bear with me just to make sure that I can work the slideshow. So I'm just going to try and make sure I've got access to that. Yeah, I think I've got control. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Gray. I'm the Service Delivery Inspector for Perth and Kinross. I've been in post now for 2.5 years. And it's really positive for me to see such a good representation from the community elected members and people from Perth and Kinross, most of whom I know your face, and some of whom I got the opportunity to meet for the first time last week. So really positive, and thank you all for coming along. I suppose first off, for me, just in the spirit of what Bailey Michael Williamson was saying there, sorry, I've lost my presentation there. Can everybody else still see the presentation?
It's still on the screen, Steve.
That's fine, thank you. In the spirit of what Mike Williamson was saying there, I wasn't directly involved in the project throughout. That was led by the LAC, the local area commander, Tom Leonard, who has since retired. And I think most of the Perth and Kinross members will agree he was a really positive community policing team member in Perth and Kinross. So he's sadly no longer with us in respect of he's retired. And the community inspector was Paul Haig, who sort of delivered the community policing on the ground in respect of the project, and he has moved on. But as I say, I've been here now for 2.5 years. I do have a good sort of knowledge of the project and what's been going on since then. So, you know, I'm delighted to be here and have the opportunity to speak to you all and go through things with you in respect of Letham. So, as I say, the local community policing element of this was overseen by the local area commander, Tom Leonard, and put into practice by Inspector Paul Haig in the Perth community policing team. Paul Haig, he attended at the community conversations and he engaged with the attendees to provide details on, you know, the feedback that we've received and what the plan was in Letham going forward to try and address some of the issues that had cropped up, along with the community policing officers. And then I suppose I don't want to insult anyone because I know she's on the call, but in the background we had Carol Addison, who at the time was a police officer working in the Partnerships, Prevention and Community Wellbeing team, which is a National Police Scotland team, and she helped engagement with local partners throughout the research. So I don't want to throw anyone under the bus and invite Carol into it, but I know she's on the call. So if there is anything, Carol, that you want to chip in, please feel free to stick your hand up and feel free to add into that. So I suppose to start at the beginning with the feedback that we received, it's already been touched upon by the SPA members on the call. So the feedback that we received, a lack of visibility in the community of police officers out, and I suppose it's the old adage of just seeing police officers out on the beat, which people were missing. Another issue was communication. Again, I'll come on to touch on that, and it's something that I think we've got a long way to go with communication, and there are some issues in and around that in relation to social media. But I think if we had a better way of communicating with our local people, it would be much easier for them to understand what we do, and just to make sure that they know that there are police in their communities, although they may not be as visible as they once were. And then there was also surveys undertaken at local schools, and we got some really valuable feedback from the kids in the community, who, I think the feedback from them was overwhelmingly positive, and they enjoyed seeing police and they wanted more engagement with police. So to try and combat some of those issues that were highlighted, start off with communication and engagement, to try and provide that visibility of officers. And I've seen it come in the feedback. We introduced named officers for the area, just so that people knew who those officers were. So as you'll see in the photo, I don't know if you can make them out, they're kind of disguised there with their glasses and helmets on, but we've got PCs Sean Kelly, Lindsay Walker and Mark Simons, who are part of the Perth community team here. And that is them out and about in their local community on their bikes, engaging with people. So given the feedback was, lack of visibility, not knowing who the local police were, we thought this was a good start just to get that out into the public space. We actively engaged with community groups and hosted pop-up events, which, we try to do as regularly as we can. We host them ourselves. Coffee with a Cop always has been a fairly popular one in Perth and Kinross, certainly. But also what we try and do is jump on the back of community events that are already ongoing, whether that be bringing a van along to a community day or bringing a stand along with officers there ready to engage with people. We tried to do as much of that as we could. Again, it's been touched upon already. There are issues with that we're aware of, with call demand impacting on that, and it can be really frustrating if we've made plans to come along to events, especially school events, and then the officers get pulled away to something else. And we've tried to address that, but as everyone probably understands, there are certain issues that take place, but we can't avoid that happening. We have also looked at visibility in respect of, things have moved on in the last sort of 20, 30 years in respect to crime types and how we deal with crime. And I suppose we needed to try and let people understand as best as we could that although we don't have the same volume of officers walking the streets and walking their community areas in full uniform, we do have a number of specialist teams to try and manage the new crimes that we've seen coming through with the evolution, I suppose, of mobile phones and internet crime and things like that. So it was about trying to show people and let people understand that we have these teams in CID and the Public Protection Unit, the Internet Investigations Unit, Road Policing Unit. So although it may seem like there aren't as many officers on the ground, we do have them in the area ready to respond to whatever issues do come up. We tried to promote wider use of social media within our organisation. We have specific social media groups, if you like. So we've got a Perth and Kinross social media page on Facebook and X, and we've got a Police Scotland one, which is separate. And we get a lot of the same messaging, but I think the Perth and Kinross one is good because it's more local and probably more relevant to the people who live in our area. We were at a meeting last week and we discussed the social media and some of the issues that we do have, and I'll come on to them later. But what we've tried to do is you said we did type strategy with our social media. So when we become aware of a problem through engagement with the communities, we highlight what the issue is, we say what we've done, and that tends to give us a really good sort of engagement level with the community when they see that, you know, it's problems that they've highlighted that we're looking to address and we've taken action in. And through the Commander's Bulletin, which I know some of you will have seen on the call, so that has changed slightly. We've tried to make that more engaging and more relevant, but at the same time, it's trying to find that balance between, you know, keeping it relevant to the local area, but keeping it, I suppose, not too lengthy. It needs to be kind of snappy and engaging for people. And if we put too much in there, people can just lose interest, I suppose. So that's some of the measures that we've put into place in relation to the sort of community engagement. Education, the community policing teams engage with a broad range of young people and educate them in regards to the role of the police in today's world. And that we do that through school talks, both at primary and secondary, and through attending meetings with numerous youth groups in the area. And you'll see there that's a couple of the community officers, one of the community cafes with some young people there. And you know, what we're looking to achieve through that is that we'll improve the confidence of young people for them to engage positively with police officers when they see them. I know it can be a bit scary for young people, I think, to try and speak to police officers with their uniform on. So the more that we can try and engage with them in a safe environment for them, the more hopefully it'll be easier for them to engage with us and report matters to us. We looked at PSYV, so we've got the volunteer team in Perth and Kinross. And we deployed them to assist the Plan Matters in the Letham area and seek to promote PSYV. And that's something that we probably need to do more of, in my eyes, even now, just whilst we're engaging with youth sit groups. We need to get Ashley Duncan, who's the Perth and Kinross PSYV team leader, along to more of those to try and get her to sort of fly the flag for PSYV and gain more volunteers to I suppose, build that community spirit and joining in with the PSYV team. So a bit of ongoing work, I would say, in relation to that. And then we've got the partnership work. So obviously the big issues that were identified, antisocial behaviour and drugs misuse, which came back through the feedback we've already seen. We already carry out work with community partners such as the Safer Communities team at the council and Letham for All, and we'll have introduced weekly meetings. So I think I discussed this again last week at our local meeting, but what we found was that after COVID, a lot of the good practice, I suppose, that we had in place sort of fell by the wayside due to lockdowns and less people out and about, I suppose. And a lot of that we had to reintroduce. So what we did is we had a weekly meeting introduced between the community policing supervisors and the council Safer Communities team. And what they'll do is they'll discuss issues that have gone on in the community from the weekend or the week before, and then we can talk about how best to tackle it, you know, for the upcoming week. And we've found that that's been a really positive means to try and target specific areas and direct the resources to where we need them and where the biggest issues are. The community wardens have been invaluable in that. You know, it's a real force multiplier for us, and I suppose, you know, it just has that added element of visibility. That they don't wear uniforms like the police, but they do wear high visibility uniforms, and just seeing that, I think, gives people that reassurance that people, you know, we do have a resource in the area. So that was the sort of partnership working that we introduced. And just to sort of come to a close, because I know we're short on time, some reflections in respect of the engagement project. So I suppose for me, it was the uptake of the questionnaire and the community conversations wasn't the best in our area, and I know that's probably been replicated in other areas. So I think we need to look at better ways of engaging with the community, which I sort of hinted at earlier. We've certainly seen that we get far better engagement when we attend at events that are already planned, rather than our own standalone events, such as the sort of coffee with a cop. So I think what we will look to do going forward, probably in Letham but other areas, is try more of getting on the back of organised events and turning up, and we'll still put it out on our social media that we're attending, but it'll just be we're attending at, you know, the Letham Hub coffee shop. Feel free to sit down and have a chat, sort of thing, and we just get far better engagement in that, doing that, than what we would do in our own standalone events. Social media, we repeatedly see poor engagement through social media. You know, we don't get that many likes, we don't get many reposts, things like that. And, you know, we do get information to show us how many interactions we get with our social media posts, and it's something that I look at. And I'm always looking for ways to try and maximise that, because, as we said earlier, I think that's the best way to let people know what we are doing in their community. You know, because at the moment they just think we're not there, but the truth is we are, and we're busy doing stuff in their local areas, and it's how we try and maximise that. And I think, you know, what we've certainly tried to promote is the reposting through elected members and people who are you know, leaders in the community, to try and just amplify what we're putting out. I think feedback on the whole was positive in respect of the Letham project, and, you know, it provided a greater understanding of policing in the community, which is, you know, one of the initial goals following the feedback. Also, it was positive that the community officers were viewed positively, and although, as I've mentioned, there are always competing demands, wherever we can, we try to protect our time when they're at these community events and drop-in sessions. And, you know, I'd just like to come to a close and say, you know, I think it's been a really valuable project, just to get that sense of the community feeling towards the police. Gave us an opportunity to try out some new things and see how that would impact. And, you know, we've taken some of that feedback back, and we'll try and improve further. So thank you very much. That's pretty much it for me, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for being as candid. I'll take a couple of questions, and then we'll go through the others, and then we'll come back to questions as well. So, Councillor Ian McPherson, would you like to ask a question or contribute just now?
Yeah, thank you. And obviously, it's a question for Stephen. Hi, Stephen. I was just curious about your comments about the importance of working in partnership, say particularly with the community wardens. I just wonder, from your perspective, do you feel that there's any more that the community wardens could be doing to assist the police? Do you think you could do with more in the team, or do you think it's a good fit and the balance is just about right? Thank you.
Thank you. I at the moment, I feel the balance is about right. We've got really good engagement with the supervisors in the council. The Safer Community team, Gillian Liversedge especially, is really proactive and really engaging, and you know, we get really good partnership working with her. You know, they help us out with all sorts of things. It's, you know, letter drops in areas where there's been crime and things like that, youths causing annoyance. They'll regularly go to that, and then it's having that open sort of information sharing where they can still highlight those children that they're coming across. We can take that information, make sure that everything is in order, and take action, whether that be visits to their home address. But just to answer your question, I think the balance is right at the moment. I don't know if I'm sure you'll be aware there's potentially some changes coming to that team in the future, which gives us a bit of concern. But you know, we'll pick that up as and when we're made aware of it.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, I think you're on mute.
My apologies. Councillor Massey?
I think Councillor Mayor was in front of me.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, my apologies about that. Councillor Mayor.
Sorry, thank you, Ian, and thank you, Tom. I've got a wee question for Stephen, and I was one of the people that was lucky enough to meet with him at the Letham Hub the other week, and we were, You know, it was a really positive meeting to meet representatives of the police and the Safer Communities team and Carol from the Hub during our current episode of antisocial behaviour. There was another episode which was reported to me on my councillor's Facebook page at the weekend, and I went back to the constituent and asked them if they had actually reported it to the police, and they said what so many of them say, well, we don't know how to do it, we don't know who to report it to, what number. So I gave them the 101 number and explained that if it was actually criminal damage they were witnessing, then they could phone 999. But I wondered, Stephen, is it okay, you were saying about the community police officers, and of course we met Sean Kelly at that local meeting as well, is it actually okay for me to advise people who are getting in touch with myself or the other ward councillors, is it okay for us to actually name the police, the community police officers, and say, you know, phone up and ask to speak to Constable Sean Kelly, or is that, should we just be saying contact your community police team? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's, in short, I think it's absolutely right that you name your community police officers. So by all means, feel free to name, you know, Sean Kelly as the local community officer. What I would say is that don't just rely on contacting Sean Kelly or any sort of direct emails or phone calls to him, because he might be on holiday or he might not be in for a number of days. So what we want to make sure is that we get the correct response in as soon as we can, without people having to wait unnecessarily. So, you know, if it's relevant or if it's suitable, then yes. But what I would say is that, you know, phone 101, say the local community officer is Sean Kelly. You know, if it's suitable for it, I'm happy to speak to him. And you know, we've got people who work in the control room who can look at the call and decide whether it's something that can wait for the community team to look at, or whether it's something that needs a more prompt response. But I've no issues, and the community team have no issues with people, you know, saying Sean Kelly's the community team, I want to speak to him, or anything like that, because at the end of the day, that's, I think, part and parcel of what we're trying to achieve here, is just a better link between the community and the police.
Thanks, Stephen. Sorry, Councillor Carol, if you don't mind, is there any other points? I'm conscious we want to go through the other areas at this stage as well.
Absolutely. I just had a very quick follow-up to that. Very quickly, Stephen. So those three officers are the community policing officers, obviously for Letham, but do they also cover the rest of our ward, which includes Tulloch, of course?
Yeah, so there's 9 officers in total for Perth City, and each of them have got an area, if you like. So yeah, they do cover other areas.
Lovely, thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Okay, Councillor Massey.
Thank you. And I echo Carol's comments that it was a really informative meeting that we held last week. Stephen, I think one of the things that we did agree on, agreed on lots of things, but one of the main things we agreed on was the communication. Now, as a councillor, and all councillors have a personal council phone. Now, in my ward, there are 3 councillors. Now, residents can contact any one of us from the numbers. I was wondering if that's something that you could look at for Perth City North, or well, for Letham area, for the 3 officers that you got up there. Would it be something that you could look at to have personal phones where they could text or call, so it goes direct to them rather than, and I mean, what I'd mean is one of them would pick it up, because I would dare say that not all 3 of them would be on holiday at the same time.
Yeah, they've all got mobile devices, which act as mobile phones as well. You know, as I said to the other councillor Carol there, I'd probably steer away from specific incidents being reported, because you know, we don't know what they're involved in. You might not get an answer, right. But they should all have a contact number available if needs be.
Right. Okay.
If you don't mind, I'm going to bring in ACC Tim Mayers, and I'm conscious to everyone that the purpose of this is the feedback on the action research. So what I want to do as we go forward now is I'll ask each area to give their input, and then we'll take further questions at the end, and then there might be some opportunity. That way, if someone has to go off the call, we don't lose them. Is that acceptable to everyone? Thank you. ACC mayors.
Yeah, thanks. It was just maybe just to support Stephen on that. We're really, really keen overall to explore how we improve communication at a local level, but you know, I've been in the position in the past where we've opened a new method of communication, and as Stephen says, because we can't guarantee that is covered 24/7, 365 days a year, we've had people coming back off leave to discover a string of text messages about a vulnerable person. And so we have to be really careful about the channels that we open. If we open one, we need to be able to manage it effectively and ensure that it's being covered. So to give that assurance, it is something we're working really hard at. I think kind of looking at kind of email options and things like that are definitely there, but we need to be clear that 101 is still the primary route for reporting incidents of concern, because that's where we're able to track and ensure that we deliver a professional service. So it's trying to get the balance across the whole piece right. So it's on our radar, but there aren't a lot of easy answers to it, I suppose, is what I would say. So thank you.
Okay, I'm sure we can continue that conversation locally as well. So thank you. Can I move on then to the next area? Was Irvine Fullarton, North Ayrshire, and we've got Inspector Cowan, Sergeant Thompson available. Can we come to Inspector Cowan or Sergeant Thompson, please? Thanks. My apologies. I think I might have jumped over Levenmouth. Can I step back a bit? I don't want to disrupt the flow of the slides that are there. But Inspector Matt Spencer from Fife Division is going to take us through that area. Sorry, Matt. My sincere apologies to you.
No problem. Thanks very much, Chair. Can I just start with an apology? I do have a cold and I've got the world's most annoying cough. So if I have to step out for 2 minutes with a coughing fit, I do apologise and ask the Chair to cover for me for 20 seconds. You will see a recurring theme that I think comes on some of the messaging, particularly that Stephen passed and Martin and Jennifer put in their presentation. I'll just start. I'll introduce, obviously, Inspector Matt Spencer. I'm the Community and Response Inspector for Levenmouth. Some of you might recognise that's Leven there in the Leven Links golf course. But the reason for highlighting that is that Levenmouth is actually quite a diverse area. Certainly, not too long ago, was in the top 5 in terms of the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation Area. And 9% of the Levenmouth population were living in poverty. So it is those kind of that area of contrast. We do have a population of 37,000, 5% of Fife in terms of land mass, and obviously well used in terms of tourism heading up to the Eastern Yukon, North East Fife, just to give a bit of context on Levenmouth. But I wondered if you might give me 2 minutes just to indulge in some of the work that we were doing before. I think it's actually quite relevant in terms of how we've brought in the work that the SPA were doing and how we've sort of dovetailed that into the work that we've already been doing. But if you go back to an initiative that was set up in 2018, it was on the back. It was interesting, some of the insights and sense of place that came in from the SPA element of the presentation around endemic antisocial behaviour, drug dealing, and the kind of issues with road safety. So we had in 2019, as you'll see from some stats in a wee second, quite a significant issue with ASB behaviour, particularly around off-road motorcycles and fire raising. Ultimately, we worked with a local area committee back then, and it was agreed that a police officer would be funded in order to try and deal with that and the enforcement and prevention element of that. That resulted in a lot of action plans enforcing and preventing behaviour and essentially listening to the public and the local communities to understand what difference they would felt. And, you know, that has had some great success in terms of a 90% plus reduction in calls to us for between the last 6 years. So much so that, in fact, we did have a funded officer from April to October every year, but that has now been increased to a full-time role. and we have that in agreement in principle moving up to March 2027. As I say, I will go through this very quickly and I will come on to the SPA element, but I think it's important just to give a bit of context and a lay of the land. But if you look at 2018, we had nearly 900 calls in terms of vehicle nuisance, which in the last year has dropped down to 63%. And ASB calls in general back in 2017 were up at that kind of just over 2,700, which is now dropped by 1,000 in the last year. So it shows a lot of work that we're doing to listen to the public. We have been working very, very closely with a lot of third sector and statutory agencies in Levenmouth as well, with Scottish Fire and Rescue, a third sector community trade hub, Youth Task Force, Kingdom Off-Road Motorcycles. We have had education officers at Levenmouth Academy until the last 12 months, working with drugs and alcohol organisations, the PSYV in the same way that Stephen was mentioning, and also trying to get that diversion inclusive element with Friday night events. One thing I should have said at the very start, I noticed, it just reminded me that one of our councillors, Ken Caldwell, has just rejoined the meeting. We have a monthly Improving Levenmouth Together meeting, which was actually on at the same time as this, so it may indicate some of the reasons why more elected members haven't joined. But Councillor Caldwell, welcome back and good to see you. Moving on, so I think one of the main issues that we had is how did the SPA come into this and how could we work alongside them? I'll be completely honest that the initial reaction when you've done the element of work that I and my predecessors have done, there was an initial kind of backlash and reaction as to, well, we're already doing this work, what can this bring to the community? But I have to say there was, you know, by opening that discussion with the SPA project team and understanding what their objectives were and what they were looking for, it was very quick to understand that perhaps we need to be careful that we're not entrenched in the ideas that we're already doing, that we need to maybe a fresh set of eyes, understand that we perhaps make assumptions as to what the public want, that we've been working in a particular way, but these are changing demands and that we need to look at what are the current priorities for the public. So we did a bit of work, as I say, in the community conversations around crimes in private space, and again in the same way that Stephen had highlighted, understanding that our policing demand has changed in terms of domestic offences, hidden harm, county lines offences and hate crimes, etc. As we'll all know from the media, cyber-enabled crime with frauds and scams has become a very challenging area for policing to deal with. And it's about understanding the public, letting the public understand that we have that additional work that we need to do that sometimes is in the background. And also the well-being issues and concerns that we have about getting mental health initiatives in place in order to deal with that demand that policing currently has. But a resounding reply from some of the public feedback was that sometimes we only highlight the bad things that we do or the more difficult, challenging incidents that we get involved in, and we don't always properly highlight the good work that is done and sometimes unseen, that we need to be better at sharing advice in terms of what we can do. And I guess it comes back to what I'll come on to in a wee second around our communication, also answering the questions about what we can and can't do. And you'll see that there are some quite recurring themes here. And sometimes understanding when it's about dealing with those drug incidents, explaining to the public that the one call, why that didn't transfer into police action, and the process that is quite complicated in the background in order to be able to take positive action on that. And also the better visibility and being able to manage expectations about how often we can be out there, but also working as best as we can to be seen by the public. So going into what did and what do we need to do, what we continue to do is our communication and engagement strategy. So it was using our existing Improving Levenmouth Together banner, which has become an umbrella for all the partnership work that we do. It might have started as an ASB element, but it's now moved on to very much more than that, and how we could use our existing partnerships We have over 20 different third sector and statutory agencies that attended that monthly meeting, and it's really, really important to use them to try and get out the positive message of policing and the communication that they have every day with members of the public. Raising our profile with partners in public, as I say, through the community champions, and using our own social media in a better way, as Steve said earlier on. I think one of the key things is we used to have a great local Levenmouth Twitter, or X as it is now, page. But understandably, there are some concerns nationally in terms of how we can use that and the professional message that we need to ensure that we have on that. So how can we best use that to our benefit? Putting out a community leaflet and newsletter, which we've done, which is informative and just gives that wee bit of information. And including on that some of the stuff in terms of spotlights on departments, whether that be CID, road policing, specialist resources, etc. In terms of the second strategy, going into the visibility strategy, we were quite keen to make sure that we as managers, as the inspector and chief inspector in the area, could be out and about and be seen by the public. So we've made every effort to do that when our day job allows, making sure that the community officers are out there and utilising the Improving Levenmouth Together funded officers as well to do so. The visibility in terms of quarterly public forums, offering them in terms of how we can best engage and answer some of the questions that they would have. And also we engaged with the warm spaces that we've had in the area, which were run by local authority over the winter to try and provide that, for those that might be from a deprived background who can come and get a warm meal. And it's making sure that we tie in with them. And again, probably comes into the point that Stephen made, that we need to be better at being on the back of these events that are in place and attending them rather than people expecting to come to ourselves. The third strategy was around education. Sorry, I've just moved that on too far. Stand by. Information on how we do a role, what we can do and what we cannot do. Again, that's a recurring point. How this works alongside our partner agencies, which I think is very interesting when you consider antisocial behaviour and the confusion that comes around whether it's reported to the police or whether it's reported to the local authority. And then also working on our long-term plans to prevent ASB or help prevent ASB and violence. We're doing some work at the minute with the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit and working with education in terms of providing that additional support as well. So the challenges we had, as we've said, how do we continue to effectively engage with the community? How do we get that message out? And I think we've had some successes in terms of that strategy that I've mentioned. How do we increase confidence in reporting? I think we'll all in policing be aware of the comments that have been made around what's the point of reporting it to the police because nothing will get done, when in reality we need to be ensuring that the public know what is appropriate to report to us and how they can best do that. And as I say, continuing to build and sustain the partnerships that we've already had in Levenmouth, but I've managed to take in this work by having that kind of fresh set of eyes and realising that there's still more work that we can always do. And I'll quickly finish with this, but there's at the minute we're looking with working with statutory agencies in terms of those high tariff, normally ASB cases, making sure that we are diverting offenders to existing third sector provision to get that additional support. As I say, it's a collaborative community effort as opposed to just sitting with policing. Diversionary, continuing to see what diversion events we can do in the community, which allows, but we need to have a sustainable funding stream in order to be able to do that so that local areas can apply into that for funding to run meaningful long-term events. As I say, we've introduced the Think Equal with as young as 3 to 6 year old children in Fife, which is, trying to improve those peer-to-peer relationships that will have a long-term knock-on benefit to the rest of the community. And then obviously continuing with our dedicated officers tackling the issues that matter most to the communities in Levenmouth. I'll go back one. Sorry, that was my last slide. So I think it is a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I'm conscious of the time. and also my voice. So it is beginning to slowly disappear. So I will pause at that point and hand back to the chair if I may.
You did well, Matt. I said we'll take questions at the end, but just the opportunity before we go off, if there's a hot question, one question that we could ask Matt just now, I'm willing to take it at this stage. Otherwise, we will wait until the end. Okay, Matt. You're off the hook for the moment with your voice. Thank you very much indeed for that. Okay, can we move on then to Irvine Fullarton? We've got Inspector Cowan there, and I believe we've got Sergeant Thompson possibly as well. So can I hand over to yourself, Michael?
Hi there, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? My mic's been a bit
you're fine.
All right, lovely. Hi there, Michael Cowan. So I'm the locality policing team inspector for Irvine down in North Ayrshire. Will Thompson, who is my sergeant, was meant to be here today, but Will's sick just now, so he sends his apologies. So I took up this role a few months ago from Inspector David Cameron, who led on the implementation and delivery of this project in the Fullarton area of Irvine. Although I wasn't involved in any of that, I'm fully up to date with the whole project and how it's progressed in the Fullarton area, and then the activities that are put in place still continue today under my team. So I'm hopefully going to speak today about that and provide a sort of positive impact to the project, the challenges and the benefits that it's offered to myself and the team and the community, in a sort of framework that it's brought about that we've kind of used across other areas of North Ayrshire, based on the feedback certainly from that area of Fullarton and Irvine. So Fullarton, Irvine, population of around 2,500. Small population in comparison to some of the other areas on here, but quite a large geographical area. It is above average. It is on the above average index of deprivation in North Ayrshire compared to the other areas. It does take in a fairly large shopping centre in the town centre, which is pretty popular. And it also takes in our harbour side and beach area, which can be really popular, which I'll touch on later. So sort of on the back of that initial engagement through the surveys and the conversations, events that were held, there was 4 key themes identified: communication and engagement, visibility, increased visibility and targeted resources, partnership working and young people. And I'll just touch on each area and what we've done. So we divided that up and we implemented some small scale initiatives that we progressed through in relation to the Irvine Fullarton area. One of those areas, social media, in relation to communication, was quite a popular one that people wanted to see us much more active on that, and I know the previous areas have commented on that, but we kind of refreshed our social media and tried to make it a bit more friendly and not as kind of hard, if you like, in the messaging we were putting out there. It is difficult. We don't comment or we don't engage with the public on social media or reply to any comments. That's a national decision, and there's reasons for that. So you do get quite a lot of negative comments come on it, but what we're seeing is if we do have the messaging is correct, then we do get also quite a lot of support for the public in replying to those negative comments, which was good to see. So we do try and put out as much good information on that as we can, and we do feel that it does bring in a lot of information back to us. We also done 2 main leaflet drops in the area, one being a public kind of notice providing advice and guidance around the use of off-road vehicles, which was highlighted as a concern in the community, and also one providing contact details for the local policing team. And we do have a dedicated email address as a generic email address. It does send out a reply straight away to let people know that this isn't a 24/7, and if it's an emergency, please use other means. So it does have is really useful, and we do get a lot of engagement with the local community with that email address, and it does seem to be really popular, and it's continued to use. We had 2 pop-up centres, one in the Rivergate Mall, which is the main shopping centre. Not bad degree of success, but maybe still a stigma for some people to come up and talk to the police, which can be difficult to overcome. But it did probably reach a lot of kind of people who maybe don't use social media, sort of harder to reach people that we continue to try and target, because we're aware that not everybody uses those modern methods of communication. Good news stories. Team are encouraged to put out as much good news stories as appropriate across social media, and we do get some positive feedback from that. Increased visibility and targeted resources, yeah, that was certainly highlighted as being a main concern of the community. Our community policing model was kind of, teams were remodelled, or the shift patterns and the numbers in them round about that same time. So it did give us the opportunity to put in 2 named police officers into that area. That has greatly improved, I believe, the visibility that the community see down there, as they do have that single point of contact with that team. And we have been able to maintain those 2 officers for a couple of years now, but I'm aware that they will be rotated out at some point, and that is the nature of the job, unfortunately, for the community. But there will be appropriate handovers in place when that time comes. We also have access to pedal cycles, and we ensured that they were all, everyone in the team had the access to that, and they are out on their bike pretty much every day. And the feedback is that the public do like to see that. We also have a priority policing team in Irvine. It is a subdivisional team, but it does have a lot of work to do in the Irvine Fullarton area, and that's 1 sergeant and 5, and they are really targeted on their priority issues every day, including drug dealing and sort of drug use within that area. And they've had a lot of success in the area, building relationships and getting intelligence back from the community, and some really positive results. So partnership working was the next theme. We have some really strong partnership working down in North Ayrshire, and it was just a case of maintaining those relationships and looking to build on any new partners that could assist us or could assist the community. So one of those partners was Irvine Cleanup Crew, which came about just after the pandemic or during the pandemic, and it is an excellent team of volunteers who basically go around picking up rubbish and cleaning up the area. We have tapped into that, as in our young police volunteers assist them, and I think it's a really good message that goes out to the community, and also it's that engagement with the young people, which seems to work really well. Trading Standards, we have a really good relationship with and have done for years, and our prevention interventions officer, who the old community safety officer, if you like, works constantly with the teams in Irvine and in Fullarton, with some cracking results in relation to, which I'll touch on, vaping, sale of weapons to underagers, under 18s that don't fall in the offensive kind of weapon category, and those campaigns have been really successful. We have the harbour side down in Irvine, which is a beautiful area, but in the summer it causes us significant issues in relation to the influx of tourist persons coming down to enjoy the weather when we do have the nice weather in Scotland. Really unpredictable, obviously, with the Scottish weather, but we can regularly have hundreds up to 1,000 youths will sort of descend in Irvine from the west of Scotland, and have, if you like, a beach party, which is really difficult to manage. A lot of antisocial behaviour. The community have continually raised concerns about that. So there is an operation which has been kind of built up over the last 3 or 4 years, Safer Shores, which is an excellent multi-agency operation that brings in all the local partners to ensure that people come to Irvine Fullarton, come to the beach and have a safe time, but also target the antisocial behaviour that goes on down there. Very difficult, very challenging, but that is well publicised across all media channels, and all the local community leaders are aware of that and aware that the operation, when it's going and there's a lot of planning goes in the background to that. So really successful partnership working there, and we'll continue to work away at that. Young people was the fourth one, and that was obviously a big concern. From our side was that engagement with young people in sort of in the Irvine Fullarton community, and making sure that we were sort of tuned into what their concerns were. We do have campus officers, police officers in every secondary school in North Ayrshire. So I think there's 9 in total, and they also take on the satellite primary schools affiliated to those secondary schools. A completely invaluable resource to have. They are part funded by the local authority. There is always a challenge every year when it comes to the budget time, where the local authorities are maybe looking at their budgets, and but we always, up till now, we've always been able to maintain that funding, because I think the local authority also realise how invaluable they are to the schools, and it is nothing but positive feedback you get from the schools. They are really attuned to working in the schools. Are there every day, Monday to Friday, 9 to 4, and the work that probably goes unnoticed from the campus officers, which probably takes a lot of work away from the front line, it can't be underestimated. So they're a great input, essentially in the Irvine Fullarton area as well, to work in sort of early prevention and intervention with young people. They're regularly given talks in the schools, but they also do a lot of work out with school, and at the weekends, after school, they'll change their shift to come out and help the local teams. Just move on. Vaping, a big problem, and that came up certainly in the survey that young people were concerned with in Irvine Fullarton. Clearly an emerging and ongoing issue that we're having to deal with. We've got numerous shops that have appeared round about the Fullarton area selling vapes, numerous issues with them selling to underage children, and also strikingly some drugs that are coming in that seem to be coming into those vapes as well, cannabis type vaping. So it's a big challenge for us, but we do have our prevention and interventions officer is a bit of a guru on that, and he works really hard with trading standards, and there's been some excellent results with warrants turned on various shops, and a lot of vapes seized, and that's kind of fed into a national picture as well. We do put that information out there to the public as well when we can, to make sure they know that we are working really hard on that subject. And there's a lot of education work goes in the background around about the schools. So I'll try and just wrap this up, because I know you're kind of short on time, but kind of reflections on that from us. I think the young people one was a big one for us during that, and it's really just building those relationships in the school, which we continue to do, to give them the confidence that policing in Irvine Fullarton around North Ayrshire is where it should be, but it's an ongoing challenge. We do have an antisocial behaviour officer that's also part funded by the local council that works within Irvine Police Office, who is invaluable again in dealing with a lot of antisocial behaviour issues in the community, mainly kind of housing issues, and we can tap into a lot of civil legislation which the council have. We probably don't put enough out there in relation to that to let the public know that we are. We do work probably in partnership with the council, but there's we have to be careful with that one in relation to what we're dealing with at the time. But it's certainly something that we'll look to improve on. I think the communication channel is the main kind of takeaway from me from this whole project. I think we probably do need to get better with what we're telling the public about, and actually telling them the good news and the good work that our officers are doing out there, because they are doing that every day. But I think from this, even just the email address and the kind of better use of social media has shown us some real good opportunities to work away at. We should be open to challenge, and I think that's really important, that the public should be coming to us when they don't think we are if doing our job correctly, they don't think we're tackling an issue correctly, and we should be held to account for it. And it's just, I suppose, getting that information back from the public so that we can respond, appropriately, if you like. So, but I do feel the confidence in Irvine and Fullarton has improved in the back of that project. There is challenges. Resourcing is always going to be a challenge, but it's just trying to protect those officers that are in that area from getting pulled away into other sort of needs of the division, if you like. But yeah, overall, it was seemed like a successful project, and it certainly threw up some questions on how we can sort of continue to improve going forward.
Thanks, Michael. Any quick question for Michael just now before we move on to Wick, and then we'll come back to it? I mean, a real strong theme coming through all of the inputs is around communication and the sustainability of particular community resources in the community with the natural change that happens through the police, the demand on policing to do other things. So the final area that we are going to consider is Wick in Highland, and I'm Inspector Mizzars on the call. Stephen, can I hand over to yourself?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name's Inspector Stephen Meadows, and I'm going to tell you about how the project went in Wick. Now, there's a fair bit of overlap between the previous three presentations and mine, so I'll gloss over that kind of detail, just to try and pull some time back. So yeah, I was the inspector in Caithness. I've been based there for 18 years, and I was involved in the project for the duration. Just to get straight to the point, during the community conversations that were had, the community weren't so much focused on what it was that the community issues that we could tackle. They're more interested about what we could do internally to help improve confidence in policing. And the three themes that were kind of identified were they wanted increased visibility and accessibility of officers, they wanted the retention of experienced officers, and they wanted some improved communication with the public. Now, being an area that's only made up of response officers, it was important to find ways that we could achieve this that were A, within our means, and B, were reliable, i.e. they weren't dependent on a resource that could be redeployed at a moment's notice. Sorry, I've lost my button. So moving on to how we improved visibility and accessibility. So much like the other areas, we introduced coffee with a cup, which is very beneficial. And actually, we found opportunities to be able to collaborate with other partners, and we had some joint drop-in sessions. To increase our visibility at community events, it wasn't too much a big onerous task for us, because for most of them, we were there anyway. But what we did do is we introduced using a marked marquee, which was a fixed point at the ground, and effectively making it a mobile police station that we're bringing to the public. So it provided a single place of reference for people to come to if they needed help, a base where officers could patrol from. And because we've got a marquee, it indicates we're actually there to stay for the duration, and people are inherently kind of programmed to go to marquees and speak to the people who are there. So it kind of opened up furthering opportunities for engagement. We also had every community council, they were given and specifically named liaison officer, and each one had their own officer. And that provided good communication with that community council to address community issues, and it made sure there was regular contact and updates. Now, we also did this with every school in the area too. In order to improve our retention of experienced officers, I think it's first important to highlight that Wick, being in Caithness, it's the far north of the Highlands. It's very rural, or very remote. Now, we've inherently had a long-standing problem of retaining officers and recruiting qualified officers from other areas. So with that comes loss of experience and the constant changeover of staff. It's very difficult to be consistent. So we got approval for us to start advertising vacancies locally in the Caithness area. And for those who lived in the area and want to be posted in Caithness, recruitment agreed that they would prioritise giving them Caithness posts. And this is a change because before what would happen was they would apply, and technically, although they gave a preference, they could be posted anywhere in Scotland. But recognising that Caithness was a hard to recruit area, this was going to make a difference. We worked in collaboration with recruitment, and we had officers and staff based in Wick trained to invigilate the entrance exam and the fitness tests. So for phase 1 of the selection process, potential applicants were able to stay in the Wick area to do that, rather than travel the 4.5-hour journey to Aberdeen, arrange the overnight accommodation, do that part of the assessment and then come home again. That meant now that if they were successful with the assessment centre, they'd only have to make that trip once. And the idea was that if we have officers who actually got actual ties to the Caithness area, then they're more likely to want to stay there for longer than we would normally have. To kind of complement that, we are committed to attend at local recruitment fairs. There's recruitment fairs held annually in Caithness, and would have local officers and our special constables. They would attend these fairs and then promote a career in with policing. And clearly the Caithness public is the intended audience there, that directly fed into that local recruitment campaign. To improve our communication, much like the other areas, social media was key. However, we weren't able to change the comm strategy around social media, which says it's a one divisional social media page for the division. Now, a division like Highlands were very far spread, and as has already been mentioned, it can get quite cluttered with the stories, and a lot of the stories aren't relevant to the people who subscribe or follow the page. But we recognise that social media is still key, so we committed to having officers trained in the use of social media so we can start seeing more stories on the page and having a better presence about successful investigations and the good work that we're doing, instead of just the normal appeal for information. We also introduced a bi-monthly newsletter, which was very well received. It highlighted the good work that we're doing, the current trends, crime prevention advice. We shared it across a number of different platforms online, and we also placed hard copies in some very key public locations to maximise the distribution. And to help improve our communication, to tell the public about how policing actually works in the local area, we had a number of sessions where the public were invited to come along and were offered an insight into what we do on a daily basis. And by doing so, we also reassured them that how the contact assessment model works and how every call, either through the police, through advice, or through signposting to partner agencies, we reassured them that every call was dealt with appropriately. So reflections on the project then. So with regards to the community conversations, I thought they were fantastic for including the public and shaping the direction of their local policing. It strengthened the relationships with the community groups. And because me as the area inspector was actively involved at the forefront of all the community conversations, it gave that strong sense of we're taking this seriously and we want to make change. And by having them at the neutral public locations, the barriers are broken down by having them away from a police setting. However, there were low attendance rates in the conversations, so to me that would suggest that we probably need a better advertisement, communicating about what the sessions were about, and making it go to a far wider audience, and also look at the timings of the events to make sure we were maximising opportunity for people to come after work as well as during the working day. Sadly for Wick, it's not all good news at the moment. The initial stages during the project, very good momentum, very good drive, because we did have a resource that was a non-response resource, and they were able to kind of drive that. And although we used the response resources to sort of do the front facing of it, that one officer was key. However, that officer was transferred to a new post due to a restructure, and that post no longer exists. And then after summer, there was significant challenges were hitting Caithness and Wick for staffing, and we had a lot of vacant posts arose. So many of the initiatives that we had in place are effectively on hold until we can get the numbers back up. Now, the plan moving forward, we still are committed to keeping this going, but we're going to have to temporarily rely on officers who may perhaps be on modified or protected duties to work on these, to be able to ensure that we can still drive them. But with that comes the risk of lack of consistency, which is something that we need to look at and overcome. The local recruitment campaign, it's had some limited success. We have had a good number of people apply. However, because it's the selection process, you know, we want the best. Many of the people that have applied have been unsuccessful. I dare say we'll get people reapplying again. But however, the benefits of this, we're looking to be more long-term as opposed to short-term. So we'd like to see that the retention offers will gradually improve as more and more people from the local area apply and get a post in Caithness. So I think the initiatives that we did put in place, they can work, but I think to make them really sustainable and give them longevity, we do need to have a way of getting a non-response officer who we can ring-fence time to keep on top of them, to then buy in from the response officers to keep that front-facing stuff going. And that's effectively what's happened in Wick.
That's really helpful, Steve. Thanks very much. And again, there is a consistency there. And some of the uniqueness in some ways, though, of the geographical location at Wick in terms of that recruitment, etc. There must be a lesson for that for other bits of rural Scotland too that will have a similar situation. So again, it's the consistency of the themes. Thank you. Any questions at this stage before we go on to ACC mayors? Councillor Ian McPherson, please. Thank you.
Thank you. It was just a quick question, really. I was just intrigued to know about the mobile police station, the Marquee. Are you still using that, or was that just for the duration of the project? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, this is something that we've received to be it's something that we'll embed. You know, as the resources get better, we'll get back to having a bigger presence at these events, and the Marquee's there to stay. It's whenever we're policing an event, we'll bring a Marquee rather than have officers walking through the crowds. It'll be a base for them to patrol from. Yeah,
that sounds like a very good idea. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. Jennifer, I believe that on the chat we've had some questions. Would you like to introduce some of those at this stage?
Yeah, of course. So we've got a question from the citizen space, and it says, this has been an interesting programme of work to follow, but unless the communities you have engaged with actually feel that some of the issues they have raised are being addressed, it risks fueling their confidence in policing. On that basis, what can the 4 communities who took part expect next? Now, I think this has been covered by a lot of the presentations from local policing colleagues, and I think it will be touched on in ACC Mayor's contribution as well. But if anyone has anything to add to that question, please do so.
And I'm sure you can pick that up on the portal at some point as well. Okay. Can you move? Susan McVeigh, you've put your hand up. Would you like to come in at this point?
Yes, thanks, Tom. I've got a quick question if we've got time. Thank you so much for all of the presentations across the 4 areas. They just show both the diversity of what's happening across Scotland, but also the shared issues and concerns, which I think are really interesting. And obviously there's a lot of learning there that can be applied right across the country. One of the things that really struck me about a couple of the presentations was some of the work that's been undertaken as a result of the community consultations, although it was kind of responding to issues, could itself potentially be quite preventive. For example, the work that some of the campus cops are doing, engaging with young people around issues, could potentially prevent youth antisocial behaviour. Some of the community engagement activities could, result in, more attention to things going on in local communities and prevention at that level. And some of the early identification of problems via social media could potentially prevent escalation of certain problems within areas. So it struck me that that's a really important message to draw out of this work. And with prevention comes cost savings, although it's not always easy to measure. So I suppose there's a question for the project team. around whether there's any plans to do any follow-up work around potential evaluation of the impact of any of these pieces of work that have been driven forward by the policing teams to just try and, you know, measure the effect of that. And also, I guess, some questions for Police Scotland as a whole around whether this is a model, a prevention model that might be implemented more generally across other areas in Scotland. Thanks.
Okay. Is there any thoughts around that from the project team?
Yes, so in terms of the evaluation that took the form of the survey towards the end of the project, I do recognise that these initiatives were designed to carry on and be sustainable, and obviously there have been some challenges in doing that, as the local policing teams have outlined. However, we were planning on kind of going back to communities, just very light touch, just to see what their views are just a little bit further down the line, because yeah, one of the constraints of this project was how it was conducted in such a short space of time. I know 3 years doesn't seem that short, but for this matter of change it is. So that's something we're hoping to kind of rectify now, just by kind of going back and seeing what's been happening. But yeah, thanks for your question, Susan. Thanks
for that. Can we come then to sort of draw the lessons from this and draw the relationship between that and Police Scotland's vision and 3-year plan, and how this aligns, and that might give some insight for you, Susan, and your question there, you know, how do you follow this up? So ACC Tim Mears, please.
Thanks, Chair, and hi everybody. And firstly, a really big thank you from me for the folks who contributed to date. It's always great to hear about really good local work that's ongoing, and hopefully you'll see that reflected in what we're going to present here. So I'm here to talk about what will become the Policing for Our Communities programme. That's looking at delivering a revised operating model for local policing in Scotland, and the objective of that is to work together to build safer communities. So the Chair, Tom, mentioned our vision. It's about safer communities, less crime, supported victims, and a thriving workforce. When I listen to what's been said today, I kind of look at that right-hand column, and the second bullet point down talks about investing in focused prevention, engaging with our communities on their priorities, and ensuring that our approach to community policing draws on the best evidence-based practice that reduces crime. And I guess that speaks very strongly to the issues that we've been discussing today. So how are we doing that? Well, we've been working on what has been known to date as the Local Policing Service Delivery Review. That's an initiative that I've been overseeing for some time now. It's been running in parallel to this piece of work. It's adopted the Scottish approach to service design. What we've done over a significantly invested period of time is a lot of in-depth work in 2 policing divisions. One is Forth Valley, and the other is, we've just been discussing, like Highlands and Islands, so very closely kind of linked into the work that's been going on there, and actually a number of the challenges that were spoken about there really came out as part of that field work. During that work, we spoke to over 800 people, so police officers and staff, and members of the public and partners, to really understand what the current position was around policing, what the challenges and barriers were, but also what the hopes and aspirations were for a better service. A lot of that information then fed into the vision that I showed to you just before, and the 3-year plan that's designed to deliver that. And you can see there that when you look over at sort of 2 o'clock, if you consider a clock, that community policing is one of those major priorities. But as you'll see, as we work through the work that we're going to undertake, it does feed into a number, in fact, all of those priority areas. So what are we seeking to deliver as part of this model? And I'll spin over these quickly because I'm going to very briefly go into a little more detail on them. But success for me looks like that our communities are and feel safer through visible and accessible policing. That, and to Susan's point and to a number of folks' points, that we prevent crime and harm before it happens. And we do that through really strong partnerships at a local level. we need to be able to deliver the right service that meets the needs of victims. And we talked a bit earlier about the challenges about 101, about being able to access police. That's critical that we really focus on that element, but also look at our own folk internally. And you did hear through the honesty of our folks, a lot of the frustrations and tensions and challenges that come from policing at this moment, in a time when we've seen our budgets really challenged and our levels of resource challenged, and yet at a time when, as Matt set out, the types of demands we're facing are becoming more diverse and more complex. So making sure that our folks are prepared and supported for that. Very quickly looking at each of those. In the community space, we are developing and will deliver a national consistent community policing model. We talk about community policing in Scotland, but in many ways, we don't actually have a consistent defined approach to that. We still rely in many ways on the models that existed at the formation of Police Scotland. Within that, a really consistent approach to community engagement, and that's what we've been discussing today, the likes of that 7-step model, the likes of using community conversations and then being able to respond to those, really, really critical. But again, ensuring that we are doing that consistently across the country, and that as an organisation, we're supporting and enabling that, but at the same time, not losing the ability to tailor that to local communities. So clearly the challenges in Wick, many of them are very, very similar, and we heard that today, but there are additional challenges that arise from being in a more remote area. And we want to ensure that we're able to support our folks and being able to tailor that service. What does that look like? Well, it does look like an increase in the number of community officers, and all of the officers have indicated to you that we've seen a reduction in resources in community policing over time. That's something the Chief Constable is committed to addressing, and that is something that this work is seeking to achieve. A reduction in removing those officers then, so in some places, community cops just don't get a chance to be in their communities because they're backfilling into response teams or they're policing at events. So making sure that when a community cop is on duty, they're in their community working with that community. We've talked loads about that ability to find, identify and contact their local policing team. That's a really critical part of this model. Overall, we want more time spent in communities. We've heard about coffee with a cop, community conversations, officers being out on the beat. That's exactly what we want to see and encourage. And actually one of the key measurements for me is that women and girls feel safer in their communities. Scottish Government track how safe we feel to walk in our communities at night. That figure overall, I think, is about 76%, and it's been increasing year on year. It's a really positive story, but when you actually break that down into gender, you discover that males probably hit upper 80s. Women and girls, it sits at just over 40%. So actually, we know that that's a real issue that we need to deal with. We can't just look at the global figure and pat ourselves on the back. We need to really engage with this issue under that agenda of violence against women and girls. So moving on to the next, this is the less crime aspect. So the two work streams on this are really enhanced partnership approaches driven by community planning, and we're in an awful lot of conversations at the moment with Scottish Government and others, the Community Planning Improvement Board, the Improvement Service, COSLA, about how we can really, really maximise the benefits of community planning for delivering that joined up work. And a well thought through design, prevention and problem solving approach. So the officers that have spoken today and the teams that they lead, we want them to be well equipped, effective, skilled and experienced problem solvers. You've heard today that they are already, but I would suggest they are in spite of Police Scotland, not because of us. So we need to invest in that, and we need to support that and celebrate it, just like we would when we have firearms officers who are really capable at their job, or search teams who are really capable at theirs. Problem solving and prevention is a skill, and it's something that we should celebrate and value and build into our operating model. If we get that right, and Susan talked about, this net investment, we're going to increase the number of community cops, and we're going to equip them and support them to undertake problem solving. That only works if we start to see a reduction in crime and ASB, because that is where the savings come for us. If I can prevent a serious assault, that actually saves the system money, because you don't have a victim who's going to an emergency department, you don't have an expensive criminal investigation, you don't have all the psychological impacts that fall out of that, not just for the victim, but for the emergency workers who have to respond to that. So prevention every time beats having to deal with it after the harm has occurred. Reoffending rates, particularly want to target that. So our ability to identify offending behaviour early and then address the underlying issues as partners. And we have really good examples of that across the country. We heard some of that about preventions and interventions, but I know the likes of the VOW team in Edinburgh, the POPs team in Glasgow, doing exceptional work alongside Scottish Violence Reduction Unit and others, but we need to be able to do that consistently, and that is a capability that should be available in every community in Scotland, not just in a limited number. And ultimately, when I look across this, it really is about an increase in community trust and confidence, as we started this with. That is the most important metric to us as Police Scotland. Our colleagues in strategy, insight and engagement do an awful lot of work to track that, but directly and specifically how we act needs to deliver a positive outcome on that. I'm going to skip across the other two just because they're not as immediately relevant to this conversation, and I'm just mindful of time. But that just gives you a sense overall of the programme and how it'll come forward. So the priority is, well, the first part of this really is what we're calling the Enhancing Community Policing Project. That will look at the community policing model, and it'll look at our response policing model. And what we want to do is that's a vast amount of our resource. Over 50% of our resource sits in response policing, for example. We're wanting to remodel that in a way that invests in prevention rather than in response. That work is ongoing, and I'll talk about the timeline shortly. The investigations and safeguarding project will really pick up our detectives, the CID, but also those who do fantastic work in the space of public protection and the investigation and safeguarding of vulnerable people. And the last bit of work is our enabling services project. So there are an awful lot of services in local policing divisions that support the front line, firearms licensing, crime management and other things. We believe that we can deliver those more efficiently and effectively, and in doing that, release resource again to invest into community policing. So enabling services will deliver that element for us as well and allow us to invest in the front line. Very quick timelines. We're really working to April 2025 for the documentation governance papers to be ready. They'll then move through our internal governance within Police Scotland and then to the Resources Committee at the SPA for approval. Following that, we'll move to our first division, and that will be Forth Valley Division, where we will essentially deliver that model and then monitor how that performs. And we're working with CIPER on the methodology for that and how we'll do that. We're really ambitious then about rollout, so all being well with that, by September 25, we're then looking to commence the rollout across Scotland, and initially we'll be looking at sort of 2 divisions every 3 months. So there are 13 policing divisions in Scotland, and our hope would be that by the end of the financial year 25-26, we'd be live in 5 divisions with firm plans moving forward on the back of that. So we've put an awful lot of thought and effort into this. The work that was presented today has really deeply informed that. I'm really excited about this bit of work, and we've a real clear direction of travel now. And once we do start to implement this, it will move pretty quickly. So that's a very, very quick cut through, Chair, and happy to hand back to yourself.
Thanks very much, Tim. I will draw the event to a close now in the sense that we've heard from all the elements of it and that higher level relationship to where the leadership of Police Scotland want to go. My sincere thanks to the team and the local policing divisions in supporting that team in this action research. Let's go back to the purpose of it, was to work with areas where we knew that trust and confidence in police was less strong as a baseline in areas that were suffering other challenges, particularly in deprivation. We sought not to just go to one area or look at one community, but to see what it was like in the whole of Scotland, by taking 4 areas, diverse areas, and not just going into the major conurbations which traditionally you're drawn towards. And when we did that, and my real thanks to those, particularly the 4 inspectors from the divisions who gave us their time today. They've got all the other demands that are there that we keep talking about, and they've committed to this. And one of the things that have been is very candid and told it how they experience it locally. And what was really significant is there was a consistency of the themes across them. But also there was a consistency in that theme when we heard from Tim Mayers about where they see it going in that review of local policing projects. You know, those areas about visibility, access, retention of experienced officers in the community where they're known and need to be known, and improved communication, that you're able to find them, who they are, contact them locally, the focus of community policing teams, that preventative focus, and you know the problem, persistent problem that comes through in relation to antisocial behaviour, and working with those areas that really matter to people. You know, and we've talked about the safety of women and girls for one example. So there is a consistency, and that is a shared agenda across Scotland, not just for policing, but for Scotland, and having the support today of so many elected representatives. And from the Scottish Police Authority, just highlight the support we've had from COSLA and elected members in relation to the development of scrutiny panels to make sure that policing performance and activities locally are open, transparent and challenged in terms of its local relevance, has been so important in rebuilding confidence in terms of policing across Scotland as well. So this is a small cog in that big wheel, but it's a very important cog that's allowed community people to come in and engage in that communication with us. So in terms of the Scottish Police Authority, to everyone that's been involved, there's a lot of lessons come out of this, and I want to thank everyone for the work that they've done, and for everyone the support they've given. And there's an absolute commitment I know, from Joe Farrell, the Chief Constable, and our executive team, but also from the Police Authority and working there. As we all know, accountability and scrutiny is not just about challenge. It's not just about asking those awkward questions. It's about how do we support and facilitate improvement and promotion. And that's what, by giving our time today, that's been a big part of that. So understanding what's needed, sharing it through knowledge exchange, etc., is so important. So if I can draw it to a conclusion now and say thank you for your attendance today, and it's greatly appreciated. Thank you.